Okay, hi everybody, welcome. I'm so pleased to welcome Deb Vilas, Child Life Specialist and Parishioner at the Church of the Heavenly Rest. Deb is here today to talk about the pandemic and what we can expect for ourselves as parents and some tips for how we can support ourselves and our children during this time. Welcome, Deb.
Hi, Lucy. So good to be here.
So Deb, tell us a little bit about your background, child life and education and the field. What is that and how
Sure,
to us?
sure. I worked for many years in New York City hospitals, both at Bellevue Hospital and Memorial Sloan Kettering, as a child life specialist. And I am now an educator at the Bank Street College of Education, where we're preparing graduate students to do child life work. And some of you may not have heard of this field. It's not well known, but child life specialists are the folks in hospitals whose sole focus is to make things easier on children and families. And they do this by using play and education to prepare children for procedures and help them understand what's going on with their bodies. And they also they help parents in tough situations in hospitals be the best they can be for their kids by helping them understand what's going on and how they can best support their child through the hospital experience. And we call that family-centered care. So you might, if you've ever had a hospitalization in your family, you might have seen playrooms. These are all run by child life specialists, and we as specialists come from a training of child development and medical terms, and yeah, I guess that's that's the best way I can explain that. I'm sorry, it's a long explanation because people say, gee, is it like a social worker? Well, not really, because we're doing hands-on work. We're in procedure rooms and in operating rooms helping children cope with anesthesia induction, or supporting families in an emergency room on how to hold their child and comfort their child during painful procedures. So
Wow,
that's the
fascinating.
difference.
Yeah, I had never heard of child life specialists before I met you, which says something about my own education, but it's fascinating, and I can see some of the intersections with chaplaincy and work
Yes.
with the church too. Um, since your work has been primarily in the hospital setting, and in maybe obviously in hospital settings there can be certainly long-term crises, but
Mm-hmm.
there might also be more short-term,
Yeah.
a beginning and an end, or a clear end in sight, although
Yep.
lots of uncertainty there. This situation, while certainly medical if someone is sick or in the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't seem to have the necessary clear boundaries. How might your work help us understand the pandemic and the crisis in children's and families' lives now?
Sure. Well, you know, when you talk about short and long-term medical experiences, there are some situations such as chronic illness, when you have a diagnosis such as diabetes, or asthma, or cancer, where there is a lot of unknown. So in some situations, families have experienced this before, but I think that there are certain things about COVID that are so unique, and starting with the isolation, the social distancing. This is new to everybody. So we're still trying to figure out how to navigate it and wrap our own brains around it as we figure out how to support our families and children through this. But we can look to past struggles that folks have been through. And certainly child life specialists are trained to help people through medical crisis in how to help them make meaning out of it and understand what's going on. And as parents, you know, one of your jobs is to help your children understand, even as you are trying to understand yourself. So, yeah.
Wow. How can we make meaning out of COVID?
Okay.
I'm going off script. So.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And if any of you have read or heard of Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote about how you make meaning of something as horrible as the Holocaust. So he studied what helped people both survive concentration camps and come out and have fulfilling lives afterwards. And he spoke very clearly about making meaning. And when we work with children and families, we do something called loose parts activities, where we have folks gather common household items, anything from string to paper to glue, clay, Play-Doh, and make 3D representations of their diagnosis or a procedure that they're going through. So we have been, all child life specialists around the country have been helping children make little kind of do-it-yourself coronaviruses. They've made corona bingo. They've helped make videos and used play to show children how to do a COVID test if the children have to be tested for COVID. And so using play to do these things both helps give factual information and understanding, which brings down anxiety. But that meaning component that you mentioned, when you can make something in a 3D form and play about it, that is how you're making meaning. That's one way.
Wow. What other ways can it sounds like play is a way to engage children in making meaning. What sorts of behaviors or what sorts of activities can we bring into our household? Maybe play is one of them, or all of them, that can help children not only make meaning, but begin to build resilience during this time of unknown.
Sure. For young children who just gravitate towards dramatic play, and even young school-age children, just giving them materials that will engage them in the topic. So if you have play medical kits at home, setting up a little doctor's office corner where they can take care of dolls and test the dolls and play through some of their thoughts about illness. Another huge thing is for all children not to be able to be with their friends and their teachers in school. This is a very, very painful loss for them. And if you can get some cardboard boxes, as long as they're COVID free, if you let them sit outside your apartment for a few days before you use them, you can make one box for them to play in that represents home and one that represents school. And they can play back and forth in these boxes, either one that's big enough for them to crawl into and make windows and doors in, or a smaller box that they just use miniatures, Lego people or small dolls to play about going to school. When we provide children with the materials and the space, they do it on their own. It's not even that we have to tell them to do it. But I think that the play is an important component, but so is conversation and information. It's how do you, as a parent, titrate what information you take in so that you are staying calm, and to know that you might have two parents in one household who deal differently. One may watch the news all the time and one may avoid the news, and respecting those differences, but understanding that your children do need to be protected from continual exposure to the news. They can't process it and it can make them very anxious. So think about how you model for your children, kind of having protective, peaceful times and places in your home, when, especially in small space, when it can be really hard to control it. And make sure that you make time to talk about coronavirus with kids and check in with them. Use terms like COVID-19 and coronavirus to help kids distinguish between that and a common cold, because they shouldn't be afraid of everything, right? But they just have to know the difference. Explain that people are getting sick from new germs, ask them, what do you know? What are you hearing? What are you wondering about? What are you scared about? Asking these questions is, instead of avoiding it, actually helps children have a place to talk about their feelings and their worries and work through them.
Wonderful. Thank you. Those are really clear, helpful. It's a clear, helpful task list that I feel like we could all put into place right now.
Yeah.
Really helpful. Saying all of that, knowing the ways that we can help promote a healthy conversational environment and a healthy play environment with our children, we understand that obviously children's behavior is going to change, has already changed as children are processing the loss, which you describe, of their
Yeah.
schools, of their friends, of maybe even summer camp,
Yeah.
seeing other family members, maybe missing, if they've left the city, missing their New York home, just the loss of routine in general. What sorts of behaviors can we expect as normal responses to COVID-19 right now? And
Sure.
what behaviors do we want to be on the lookout for, and how can we help support, continue to support healthy processing of those emotions and behaviors?
Sure, sure. It really has to do with two things. Well, three probably. Child development. How old is the child for what we might expect from them? What is their temperament? And by that, are they a slow to warm child, a feisty child, an easy child? I know those are huge, broad strokes, but that can often tell us how a child is going to cope. And what is your family system like? How do you cope with stress? And therefore, what are you modeling for your child? So those are all some of the many variables. And some of the behaviors that you might see are what we would call regressive behaviors. So maybe there are normal milestones that your child has achieved, like toilet training, and all of a sudden there are some accidents, or they want to wear Pampers, even though they've been wearing underwear. Parents might find that their child is clingy, more clingy than usual, that they don't want to be separated from them, that it's hard to shut that door or make that space for the parent to do their work, that children feel that you feel a sense of need of attention from your child. You might see some somatic things, stomach aches, headaches, trouble with sleeping or eating, and maybe withdrawal, maybe some tension or fights between siblings. All these are normal childhood things in general, normal responses to stress. And they're things that usually, hopefully, work themselves out with good support and as things become more normalized. We feel that as child life specialists, one of the things that parents can do is name feelings and model naming feelings for children. So if you're noticing all these things, you might want to fix them and like make your child be less regressive. If they're baby talking, say, well, talk like a child your age, don't baby talk. It can actually be a lot more helpful if parents can say, I see you feel very small right now. Yeah, we all feel that way sometimes. Or if a child is having trouble with sleeping, say it can be scary to go to sleep at night away from mom. Empathy is a huge, huge factor in lowering children's anxiety and helping them cope with their feelings. Because when it can be spoken about, this is what Fred Rogers said, it's all something that we can deal with. But as long as it's not spoken about, it's a lot harder.
That's such a good reminder. I think it's, I mean, I have a 6-month-old, so I think it's not, although now I'm thinking, is she regressing? Is she regressing because of COVID? But the empathy piece, I mean, even for me, even as a young baby, when she was really young and first born, I was always trying to think of when she was crying and crying and crying, how to express empathy. And I think sometimes it can be hard to remember to say, I see that that you're struggling, or I see that you
Yeah.
feel small right now, or I see that you're in pain right now, or I hear that you have something that you want to say,
Yes.
without judgment. So it's a really good reminder. Thank you for that. I think we can all learn from that.
Yeah, and you could start now with a 6-month-old, and then it becomes just automatic by the time that she is able to have receptive language and understand even before she speaks.
Yeah, really helpful. That said, I want to turn now to parents and sort of how we are able to pause and remember to respond in those helpful ways. I know that I have a significant amount of anxiety, and that comes out in all kinds of ways, especially in a small Manhattan apartment.
Yes.
What can I do, and what can parents do to make sure that we're caring for ourselves and responding to our own anxieties? What are normal feelings that parents can be?
All feelings are normal. So that's where we start. We start with that broad stroke that everything from anxiety to resentment to crabbiness to sadness to, I mean, disappointment, the gamut. This is what we always tell kids: all feelings are okay. All behavior isn't. We don't want to hurt people, but I think a great place to start is to do self check-ins a couple of times a day. And you can just, all it takes is 10 seconds, is to say, okay, first, where am I holding tension in my body? And just asking that question is going to make, I was just holding my hands in my lap and I released them. So that is one quick thing. And then everybody's been hearing this, and they say they're tired of hearing it, but deep breathing regulates your nervous system. And a couple of slow, deep breaths can relax your nervous system and take you out of the constant vigilance. Knowing that anxiety is a feeling like a cloud that can pass, and if you feel that you can withstand it for a few moments and let it pass over you, rather than fighting it and saying, I shouldn't be feeling anxious. I should be able to control this. You can't. But if you let it flow over you, and when you're more regulated, you're going to be modeling that verbally and non-verbally to your child. And if you are working to be gentle in your self-talk, because that's one of the most dangerous places, is inside our heads when we're saying we shouldn't be feeling this way. But if you're gentle and say, up, look, there it is. There's the anxiety. Here it comes. Up, there it goes. You can be taking that step back and being able to do the same for your child. It's about putting the oxygen mask on you first. That really. And I guess I would also say, ask yourself, what are you doing for self-care every day? And if it's only 5 minutes of prayer or meditation in the shower, if that's the only minute you get for yourself, that's enough. And a theorist called Winnicott, who's a developmental theorist, talked about the good enough parent. And you need to tell yourself that you do not have to be stellar to be good enough for yourself and your family. That this is not a time for everybody to be showing how perfect they are. That in our vulnerability is our strength and our love and our power to be there for our family.
That's extremely helpful. And I think a good place to end on, we could talk about this all day.
I know.
And I know that Deb has given us her resources and herself and her time over the past 2 months during this pandemic. Deb's done regular parent check-ins with us, and now has offered us this interview, as well as a Google Doc that's available in our email, or you can email me if you'd like the link, full of podcasts and websites and books and all kinds of wonderful resources for parents during this time. Deb, anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I just think trust in yourself and trust in your expertise as an expert in your child, and you're probably getting to know your children more than you ever did before just because of this. And maybe there are some really nice silver linings about that. Um, but still, always be gentle about the cracks, because they're there too, and they're there for everybody.
Thank you, Deb, so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for joining. All right.